Hi, welcome to CS 170 fall. Um, just going to pick up on some of the logistics before we get into some material here. So I posted the video earlier, which you'll see if you come to my page. Um, this is the introduction video. So if you click on it, it'll go to the YouTube video. It's also posted up in the media gallery. So if I go over here to media gallery, you'll see I already got like the playlist set up for week 1. So I posted that here also. Sometimes the high definition version of these videos will pop up sooner here than on YouTube. Sometimes YouTube takes a while to convert to YouTube videos to high definition. You may also notice that if you go on to YouTube and look under my ID, you'll see like a whole bunch of the lectures that have been recorded for prior semesters. So they are covering the same topics, but they tend to be maybe a little bit different. They kind of vary slightly because I try to customize the lectures and add bits based on people asking me questions. If there's some common thing that they're stuck on, I try to enhance the lecture to cover those topics. But for the most part, they cover the same topics. So if people want to choose to go ahead of what I have laid out here every week, you're welcome to do that. So you can just go ahead and look at those videos I've posted up to YouTube for the prior semesters. Sometimes I cut special videos that are like covering specific topics that people are having trouble on. So it doesn't quite match up to like the course agenda. So that's fine. So you might find that useful. So go ahead and try that if you see something that's interesting that you might find useful. Okay, so let's go back to here. So the other thing I also put in here is the logistics slides. And this is kind of covering like all of the different sections for CS 170, not just mine. So it pretty much covers what I covered. The only thing that I noticed that I missed in there, which I'll kind of mention here, is the idea of free lates. So free lates, you have one free late. And what that means is that you remember I was talking about when you submit your assignment late, that you're going to get 50% off your grade. So with the free late, as long as you tell myself and your TA ahead of the normal due date that you're going to exercise your free late, then you can submit it by the submitted date as of submit by date. And then you won't lose 50% off. But you have to make sure you let us know before the original due date for the assignment. Okay, so be mindful of that. And if you want to just refresh, go ahead and take these logistics slides. But like I said, I think I covered all of this material from the introduction lecture. Okay, now the other thing is, you remember I was talking about the modules here. So I'll try to put stuff here, but remember your module also contains stuff. So if I click on that, that'll give me this. Okay, and I just clicked on the week 1 resources, which is this week. And so you'll see, like, here's your textbook, right? What are we doing here? What are we trying to learn? What's our learning objectives? So you'll see we have chapter 2. What is all of these different things here? And then what's going to happen in your recitation. So this is kind of like maybe just giving more details to what you see on your student schedule, which is what I mentioned over here, the student schedule. Oops, that was a syllabus. Let me get out of here. Where's the student schedule at? Oh, let me go back to here. I must have put the wrong thing in there. So course information and student schedule. So I linked the syllabus in there, so I should fix that. But anyway, you can see it's laid out. Like I said during the last lecture, it's laid out every single week, what we're supposed to be covering, what the readings are, the recitation, the assignments that's going to get posted, the due dates, the posted date, the scoring. So, you pretty much have a very clear view of what we're going to be doing on any given week. Okay, whether it's looking at this, looking at the modules, like I said here, right? So kind of just gives you more detail than what the spreadsheet gave you. Okay, so it's something for you to pay attention to. Okay, so I could even see here, you can see the lecture is talking about chapter 2 here, which lines up to here, chapter 2. Okay, so let's see here. I'm gonna close this and let me get over to here and chapter 2. Close this up here. Okay. And, so this first lecture is, or first week, it's basically a lot of students are going to be doing add drops. So not going to really do anything very heavy or complex this week, because there will be students that may not show up until for class until next week. Okay. And that's why your assignment this week is only an extra credit thing. So it's not really a heavy week. You're only doing one lecture this week, essentially. But so we'll go ahead. So this is by design, the way it's set up. So this first topic is human-computer interface, right? So this, along with a couple other chapters, I would draw an analogy towards almost like studying for a history class or something. So you it's almost like reading book knowledge, right? So whatever you have in the book for chapter 2, you're probably best served to make sure you pay attention, like read through that chapter 2 in the textbook, take some notes, and save that for your exam. That's pretty much, what you should really pay attention to. So this is one part of the class that's not really like you actually doing programming or doing some process, right? It's more like you read some information and you're able to refer back to that information or draw some conclusion from that information for the exam. Okay, so you can take it for what it's worth, right? So what I'm going to go through, I'm going to probably read through this, but like I said, you're probably best served to make sure you just read the textbook on this, take some notes on this stuff, and use that as part of your notes that you'll use for your exam that comes up. Okay, and we'll probably ask you some questions, sort of like, what do we mean by feedback? What's some examples of that and stuff like that. So it's kind of that type of knowledge for this chapter 2. Right, so I won't spend too much more time on it, but like I said, for this aspect of the course, it's one of those things that read the book and make sure you understand the points being made in a book, and just take some notes and refer to it for your exam. Okay. So this is basically just talking about all the things that you probably have in your daily lives, right? Whether it's like your mobile phones, accessing Wi-Fi, doing stuff on the internet, social media, doing games. I guess this is supposed to be like a cloud, so doing stuff on the cloud, all the pictures that you take, upload to the cloud and whatever, right? So that's kind of like the different things that, it's probably commonplace for most of you, okay? So human-computer interface is really just talking about how do you interact with your computer, right? I mean, there's many different ones. If you look at, probably the most common ones right now, probably most people are accessing their technology via their phone. Okay, who knows what it may be in the future? Maybe it's more and more on the voice side of things. Maybe it's virtual reality. Who knows? But as of right now, it's kind of everything in terms of interface is very driven off of like the mobile platform. Okay, but this is almost going to be like a history thing, right? We'll kind of go back into the past history of computers, how they developed, and we'll see how we got to where we are now. Okay. So one important concept here is the idea of user experience, right? And you all know this, right? the people that are very successful with this from a commercial standpoint would be, you know, people like Amazon, but there's others too. And it's the overall user experience. And that's kind of actually even drifted into like the bricks and mortars world too, right? So taking, you know, someone or your customer, let's say, and how do they engage with you as someone who's offering a service or selling a product? Um, and how do you feel when you come out the other end of this process? Do you feel good? Do you feel brand loyalty? Um, you know, are you feeling happy to spend more money on this product or continue to support this company, whatever, right? So it's a very big thing with user experience, right? And if you look at history, you know, the user experience has come a long way. It was very clunky at the beginning, and a lot of people were just feeling their way around. And now, not to say we've reached perfection or anything like that, but you know, it is a lot smoother, right? You know, the idea of like in Amazon, the idea of one click, right? You know, if you make it hard for someone to buy your product, even if you have a great product, you may not get as many customers as you would like, right? People have a very short attention span, especially these days. So, you know, they don't really have that much patience for a clunky user experience, right? So these are the this is Venn diagram, and this is kind of sort of something that you're going to see more of actually when we go into like searching for different things on the internet, and I'll get to that later. Okay. So you can see UX is sort of like the intersection of all of these different concepts here. Okay. Um, you know, if you see something, just like when you do writing, right? If you see something with all kinds of different weird fonts or spelling mistakes or laid out hard to read, stuff like that, you don't really think that's really professional, right? You know, back in the days before you had like all of these, you know, products to make your stuff look slick, you know, people would do it by hand or, you know, come up with their own formats for things. It was very easy for things to just not look professional. It looks kind of amateurish, right? But these days, there's a lot of tools that basically package things up and you just have to put in some content and then it just makes it look very slick and professional, right? So, you know, that type of thing, if it's not looking that level of slick and professional, it just makes you look like you're, you know, amateur basically, right? So, so that part is, you know, kind of self-explanatory, right? Usability, right? I kind of think of it in terms like what are the capabilities, what can it do, and intuitiveness, right? So, you know, I can tell you personally, if I go to like deal with, uh, you know, paying my bills on like the electric company or, you know, going to like the township website to pay my property taxes or this or that, water bill or whatever, most of those interfaces are horrible, right? The usability is absolutely atrocious, right? They obviously don't have much experience from the likes of like what you're used to, let's say on Amazon, where you can look at your past history of purchases. And it's very intuitive. You don't need like a, you know, any training. You don't need like any like user manual to figure out how to use it. All of that type of thing. So usability is there and just the overall feel, right? Um, you know, is it like, you know, you click on something, you don't have any feedback, you don't have any understanding, like, are they doing anything? You know, did your transaction go through? Those type of things, okay? You know, and I'm sure if you think about it, you'll kind of have a good feel based on probably most likely your e-commerce interactions on what is a good user experience, right? Most places now, if you don't have a good user experience, you're probably not going to be successful as an e-commerce setup, okay? So part of what feeds into that, well, feedback, right? So if I click on something and let's say it takes a long time to process, right? And I just click on it and you don't see anything. You don't know whether the computer is doing something. You don't know whether there was an error. You don't know when it's going to get done, nothing, right? I don't think anyone likes that, right? You're probably sitting there, you probably end up clicking it multiple times or whatever, right? Just like when you go into an elevator lobby, right? People hit the elevator button. They like to see like the elevator bank. They like to see the elevator with the number coming down. They all say, oh yeah, the elevator is going to be here soon. And you know, knowing when it's going to come doesn't make it come any faster. But having that feedback mechanism sort of like, addresses like you're probably impatient, right? So if you look at, on a computer, typically if something's going to take a long time, maybe you'll see like a progress bar that kind of shows how far along you are on downloading something, maybe, whatever it is, right? Maybe even how far you are in a movie or something, right? So consistent interface, right? If I learn how to use one part of, let's say, Microsoft Office, hopefully because there's a consistent interface, I can use the other products of Microsoft Office fairly easily, right? And I just use Microsoft Office because, it's one of those common things that a lot of people use, especially we have a free license for it here at Rutgers. So consistent interface. Perfect reproduction, being digital, there's this idea of like, you're able to, and it's digital means zeros and ones, right? You can perfectly replace that, reproduce that, right? That's pretty easy as opposed to analog, which, over time, the copy will eventually degrade, okay? And placeholders, okay? So we'll come back to these, hold on, in a second, right? So like I was just talking about, what are some of the different ways that your computer gives you feedback, right? I mentioned it before, the progress bar, right? So you can see that here. Hourglass, you got processing, you got this little spinning kaleidoscope thingy. You have this directional thing going on here. You have these different things here. Like I mentioned before, your progress bar, okay? Consistent interface, right? So like I was mentioning, for like Microsoft Office, you'll see things like file and edit. You have similar types of things if I want to cut, copy, and paste on different things, right? And, like I alluded to, Microsoft Office, which includes Word, Excel, PowerPoint, among other things. So consistent interface, it helps in terms of training, right? You don't have to like learn something totally different for something that's not even necessary. It's not, required for you to do things in a different way. Why would you like store a file in a different way between Office, let's say Word versus like Excel, right? You're saving a file to the file system, do it the same way and do it consistently, right? And so, like I just mentioned, there's sort of different reasons why you would have a consistent interface, okay? A new instance, right? This would be like, basically creates like let's say a new Word document, right? A new contact form, new calendar appointment, right? And just creates a blank version of it, okay? Right, again, this is part of a consistent interface, right? This is just a behavior that happens across all of these apps. All right, this is just an example of really a mainframe interface. I doubt many of you seen it unless you work at some of these like retail, these old retail chains or whatever, like PC Richards or something like that. They still have their systems on the mainframe. So you'll see screens like this, right? So it's really text-based. So you're typing stuff here, you hit like a number and that's your menu option, right? So you hit that number or you hit this F keys, right? At the top of your keyboard. And then you step into essentially from a personal computing standpoint, the idea of like graphical user interface or GUI, okay? Now, this is an important point here, so pay attention here. There's the idea of who came up with this. Who came up with this? and who actually commercialized it, who bought it out to market. It's two different things, right? And this seems to trip up a lot of people, right? So Xerox is the first, right? So they came up with it. So you can say they invented it, right? But they didn't bring that out to the market, meaning like for for consumer use, essentially, right? It's Apple who built on what Xerox invented, right? So that's why typically a lot of people think of Apple as the GUI, and really you can say they pretty much commercialized the idea, but they actually didn't invent it, right? So that's an important distinction, and I highlight that because almost every semester I've taught this class, that seems to mess people up, right? So pay attention. The difference between inventing it and commercializing it, okay? Or bringing it out to the personal computer market, okay? So metaphors. So in this case, they're basically, look, in this initial GUI is the idea of, you're doing stuff on your desktop, right? So if you, in the old days, you were thinking about, okay, here's my desk, I would have a calculator on it, I have a calendar on it, I have a notepad, whatnot. And so they basically created the idea of this desktop on your computer. You would view it as a desktop, right? So that's what they mean by a metaphor, right? So the way you might open a file, the way you might like put stuff in the trash or whatever, everything was kind of tying it back to what people understood in the real world. And it makes it easier for them to interact with the computer, right? So instead of looking at a computer and just typing everything by the command line and say, oh, open this file or find this file or whatever, if I translate that and present it to you in a desktop form, that's a lot easier for the typical normal people to grasp onto, okay? And so you have these sliders and you have these buttons. It tries to draw analogies to like, what you might have experienced in the real world, right? Those sliders, I guess these days are probably not that common. Back in the early days, sliders were very common on things like stereos and stuff like that. And so looking at this, you're trying to look at things and see if it makes intuitive sense to you, right? You see a lot of things. Ideally, for things to work at the consumer level, you don't have to look for instructions, right? When you get your mobile phone, you download an app. Hopefully, you don't have to look for an instruction manual, right? Hopefully, it's very intuitive when whatever app you download and you can work on it, right? So if you see something that looks like an envelope, probably most people think of that as email, right? You look at this, it looks like some sort of internet connectivity. You look at this looks like a camera, right? This looks like maybe toolkit setup type of thing, right? So, that's kind of the idea with metaphors, okay? Trying to draw it to like a something that the typical person can understand and interact with the computer in an intuitive fashion, okay? All right, so this is just talking about what I mentioned before, the mouse. Apple did not invent it, okay? All right. Yeah, so it's just like a little bit of a history trivia type of thing, right? Like I said, the only thing you want to make sure you don't get tripped up on is thinking that Apple invented the mouse. Okay, so just be careful with that when inevitably you're going to be asked about that during the exam. Right, so now you go into the touch metaphor, right? So now as technology has progressed, you get all kinds of stuff now that's going to be on the mobile platform. And if you don't make your website or whatever you're doing on the mobile platform, you're going to lose out on a lot of customers, right? I don't know what the percentage is, but at least 80% of people are interacting now through their mobile phones, right? So you really can't survive if you're just doing stuff off of like a website that's designed for the desktop and not mobile friendly. right? And that's, everyone's kind of caught up with that, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Google or whatever. Um, you know, we're on to touch, we're doing stuff on the mobile phone, okay? All right, so basically you're transitioning from the mouse, right? That's more associated with the desktop, right? You're not really gonna carry a mouse and hook it up to your phone, right? Um, and, you know, so this is why you went from the touch, I mean, went from the mouse to the touch, right? So you have the small screen, you're not gonna carry a mouse with you, stuff like that, right? Now the reproduction, this is where we're talking about perfect reproduction, right? So this is where, you know, you're losing quality from one generation to another. So if you say this is your original and you go down to here, you can see how bad this looks, right? And this is what would happen if you, in the old days, if you had things like records or cassette tapes or whatever, or, you know, analog pictures, essentially, right? If you kept on copying it over and over again, you're gonna lose quality. It would degrade over time, right? So your old movies from way back when, it's gonna lose quality over time because they're not stored digitally, i.e. zeros and ones, right? Computers store everything in zeros and ones, so you can just copy the same zeros and ones, right? Okay. So this picture is the same as that picture. That's what it's meant to say, right? I don't know if you can really tell that looking at this, but yeah, they're supposed to be identical because you just copy one file to another, right? Exact copy. Okay. So copy and paste is a big thing, right? Everyone's probably doing a ton of copy and paste, right? Just don't do it for your homework assignments, please. Okay. Find and replace, another type of easy type of thing that, you know, probably people do a lot of, right? You're editing like long a document or something like that. Okay. And, you know, there's just like a little check in there, right? So what does UI stand for? What does UX stand for? Okay. If you don't know that, make sure you look it up in the book, uh, or refer back to what I said in the lecture. Um, yeah, that's those, these are important concepts here. All right. And then perfect reproduction, and then purpose. Okay. Um, this is one of those type of things you can be pretty sure it's, we're going to ask something like this on the exam, right? But I think if this concept is, you know, it shouldn't be too difficult for people to understand. But if people are not understanding that, make sure you let me know and I'll try to clarify for the next lecture. Okay. All right. So I think I'll leave it at that. I'm going to upload this to my area and you'll be able to see it. Okay. So hopefully this is nice and short. If there's any questions at all, just give me a shout. Thank you. Have a good night.